Chapter 31 Pandavas in Exile. As Yudhishthir and his family journeyed back to the Indraprasth, they were unexpectedly intercepted and drawn into yet another game of dice. Driven by his sense of Kshatriya honor, Yudhishthir felt compelled to accept the challenge laid before him. Duryodhan proposed an exceptionally unusual wager. The losers would be condemned to endure 13 years of exile, 12 years spent in the wilderness, and the 13th year requiring them to hide within a city known as Agyatvas. If they were discovered during that final year, an additional 12 years of exile would be imposed. The game commenced, and much to Yudhishthir's dismay, he found himself once more on the losing side. With heavy hearts, the Pandavas prepared for their time in wilderness. Due to her frailty, their mother Kunti chose to remain behind in Hastinapur under the care of their uncle Vidur. Meanwhile, Draupadi's 5 children, along with Subhadra and Abhimanyu, were entrusted to Lord Krishna's protection in Dwarka. News of Pandavas' exile quickly spread throughout Hastinapur and Indraprasth. Many citizens deeply attached to their beloved king wished to accompany him into the wilderness, but Yudhishthir, humbled by their affection, implored them to stay behind and look after Mother Kunti. Sages and learned men joined the Pandavas on their journey, offering guidance and assistance as they established their new home in the wilderness. Amidst this turmoil, feelings of resentment simmered amongst the Pandavas. Draupadi and Bhim were particularly vocal in expressing their anger at Yudhishthir's unwavering adherence to Kshatriya law and his destructive gambling habits. They held him accountable for their current predicament, and during one heated moment, Bhim even called for fire to burn Yudhishthir's hands in frustration. Fortunately, Arjun stepped in to pacify his hot-headed brother, recognizing the need for unity in their dire circumstances. Arjun, despite the overwhelming challenges, displayed an unusual sense of acceptance towards their fate. He suspected that Duryodhan's scheme was designed to utilize the 13 years to amass a formidable army, intending to defeat the Pandavas in battle when the time came. As a warrior prince by birth, Arjun harbored an inner fire for quest and to some extent looked forward to the thrill of combat that lay ahead. Meanwhile, Nakul and Sahadev remained steadfastly loyal to their elder brothers, dedicated to fulfilling their responsibilities no matter the hardships they faced. Yudhishthir, however, was consumed by the guilt over their misfortune, wrestling with remorse for his actions. As the eldest brother, he felt a profound sense of responsibility for the well-being of his family. Despite their hardships, the Pandavas' new home welcomed friends, well-wishers, and sages, further increasing their responsibilities. During this challenging time, Sage Vyas came to visit Yudhishthir and offered sage counsel. He advised Yudhishthir to seek the blessings of Lord Surya, the sun god, whose radiant energy nourishes the earth and sustains all life. Taking this advice to heart, the young king embarked on a rigorous period of austerities in hopes of receiving divine blessings. Finally, after much dedication and perseverance, one day his efforts bore fruit. Chapter 32 Arjun's Quest. Following Yudhishthir's intense austerities, the sun god Surya looked favorably upon the young king and bestowed upon him a remarkable gift, a mystical pot. Surya instructed Yudhishthir to give the pot to Draupadi, explaining its extraordinary properties. Any meal prepared in this pot will be inexhaustible for the day until Draupadi takes her own meal. Once she eats from it, the pot will remain empty. However, its magical essence will renew with the touch of sun's rays each day. Grateful for this divine gift, Yudhishthir returned to his family with the means to feed not only them but also many citizens who had sought refuge with the Pandavas. During this time, Sage Vyas informed Yudhishthir of the Kauravas' preparation to amass a formidable army. Understanding the gravity of the situation, Arjun was tasked with a vital quest. He would journey to acquire divine weapons from Lord Indra, which would prepare them for the impending battle. Accepting this weighty responsibility, Arjun bid farewell to his family, sorrow weighing heavily upon him as he set forth on his journey towards the north and the Himalayas. Arjun travelled for months, traversing rugged terrains until he encountered a sage immersed in deep meditation. When the sage awoke, he questioned Arjun's purpose. "I seek Lord Indra," replied Arjun earnestly. "I am in search of great weapons to aid my family in a challenging battle that lies ahead." The sage, whose demeanor reflected serenity and wisdom, responded, "You have arrived in the domain of sages and saints, Prince Arjun. Here, the tribulations of humanity are unnecessary. Rest and indulge in the pleasure of heaven." Yet, Arjun remained steadfast in his mission, resolved to procure the weapons that would secure victory for his family. The sage revealed himself to be Lord Indra, acknowledging Arjun's valor. "You are indeed a courageous prince. Continue your journey to Mount Kailash, where you shall receive all my weapons once you obtain the blessings of Lord Shiva." With renewed determination, Arjun pressed on, his journey marked by years of relentless travel and rigorous penance. Despite his efforts, he struggled to locate Lord Shiva, dedicating months to deep meditation. One fateful day, while lost in thought, Arjun sensed an aggressive charge from a wild boar. Instinctively, he drew his bow and released an arrow, only to discover that another arrow matched his own, striking the boar simultaneously. From the shadows emerged a mysterious hunter, whose eyes burned with intensity. "That boar was my prey," shouted Arjun, indignation flaring within him. "Who are you to dare to intervene in the kill of a Kshatriya prince?" The hunter responded calmly, "Your skills are of no match for mine, arrogant prince. Go back to your kingdom." Frustrated and infuriated, Arjun accepted the challenge, and a fierce battle of archery skills erupted between the hunter and the prince. As arrows flew through the air, terror gripped the surrounding inhabitants, and the clash of skills echoed through the forest. Days passed, marked by intense engagement, with Arjun's frustration mounting as fatigue began to set in. It soon became evident to Arjun that the hunter's skills rivaled, if not surpassed, his own. He began to wonder, was this journey destined to end in a confrontation with this formidable adversary? Chapter 33 Shiva's Grace. Arjun found himself at his wits' end, grappling with frustration and despair. Never before had he encountered an adversary of such unparalleled skill. He had journeyed far and sacrificed much in his quest to acquire the divine weapon that would safeguard his family. Now, the thought of failing in a battle, unfulfilled and without success, weighed heavily upon him. In a moment of desperation, Arjun broke away from the relentless battle. He gathered the soil around him to form a lingam, a sacred representation of Lord Shiva. Searching for flowers, he crafted a garland and placed it upon the lingam, offering a heartfelt prayer to the deity. When Arjun opened his eyes, he was astounded to see the mysterious hunter before him, the garland he created adorning the stranger's neck. In that moment, a brilliant light enveloped the hunter, revealing the true form of Lord Shiva. Overcome with humility, Arjun dropped to his knees, folding his hands in reverence. "My lord, forgive me for my arrogance," he said, his voice filled with remorse. "Rise, valiant prince," Lord Shiva replied, his voice resonating with authority. "You have indeed proven yourself worthy. There is no warrior on earthly plains or in the heavens who is equal to you. Ask for your boon, young prince, and I shall grant it." Arjun said, "My lord, if you deem me worthy, I wish to possess your mightiest weapon, the Pashupatastra, the celestial missile." "I grant you this weapon, dear prince," Shiva responded, "but heed my words. The Pashupatastra is capable of vanquishing all beings and even destroying creation itself if used recklessly. It must only be deployed in the most dire of circumstances and never against a lesser foe." With that, Lord Shiva vanished, leaving Arjun in awe of the encounter. In a flash of light, Arjun was then greeted by Lord Indra and the other gods, who blessed him with their divine weapons and invaluable knowledge. Overwhelmed with joy at having achieved his goals, Arjun felt a surge of hope. "Before you return to your family, dear prince, you must spend some time in my home," Lord Indra invited. A celestial vehicle descended from the heavens, whisking Arjun away to the realms above. Upon his arrival, he was greeted by majestic sights and sounds that dazzled his senses. A grand celebration awaited him, with dancers and musicians providing entertainment that filled the air with joy. Under Indra's guidance, Arjun learned to wield various weapons, including the mighty thunderbolt. Despite the incredible gifts he received, Arjun could not shake the profound longing he felt for his brothers and his beloved wife, Draupadi. Lord Indra insisted that Arjun stay for 5 years in the heavenly realms, where he would further hone his skills. At Indra's request, Arjun also immersed himself in the arts of dance and music, learning from Chitrasen, the Gandharva. These enchanting arts were unknown on earth, yet, even amid such wonders, Arjun's heart ached for his family. In the midst of his time in the heavens, he found himself captivated by one enchanting figure, Urvashi, the Apsara, whose grace and beauty drew him into a world of intrigue and desire. Chapter 34, Urvashi's Curse. During his time in Lord Indra's heavenly abode, Arjun not only mastered all the divine weapons entrusted to him, but also honed his warrior skills to an unparalleled level, rendering him unmatched in both earthly and celestial realms. At Indra's request, he even became proficient in the delicate arts of dance and music, immersing himself in the vibrant culture of the heavens. Amongst the celestial beings residing in Lord Indra's palace was Urvashi, a radiant Apsara known for her beauty and charm. As days turned into months, many meaningful glances were exchanged between Urvashi and the valiant Prince Arjun. Smitten by Arjun's handsome and virtuous character, Urvashi found it increasingly difficult to contain her feelings. One night, driven by desire, she made her way to his chambers, surprising him with her presence. "Prince Arjun," she said, "satisfy my desires. Mighty warrior, your virtues have captured my heart, and I am under the spell of the god of love." Taken aback by her boldness, Arjun replied, "Blessed lady, please do not speak to me in this way, for you are undoubtedly the equal of a superior's wife. You are revered to be just as my mother Kunti or Sachi, the wife of Indra, and are to be worshipped. While it is true that I have paid attention to you, it is only because I remember you as the mother of the Kuru race, having chosen Puru as your husband. O blessed Apsara, you should not harbor any feelings towards me. You are my superior, being the mother of my lineage." Urvashi, undeterred by Arjun's response, insisted, "O son of Indra, Apsaras are free to choose their mates. You should not consider me superior in this matter. The sons and the grandsons of Puru race have come here because of their ascetic merit and have interacted with us without incurring sin. Therefore, do not send me away, for I am burning with desire." Arjun, remaining steadfast, replied earnestly, "Indeed, I regard you as my mother. I bow my head before you and prostrate myself at your feet. You deserve the reverence of a mother, and I beseech you to protect me as a son." However, Urvashi's heartache over Arjun's rejection truly turned into fury. Trembling with rage, she pronounced a curse upon him. "I curse you to become impotent and to spend your time amongst females as dancers, scorned as a eunuch." With her words echoing in the air, Urvashi returned to her abode, leaving Arjun stunned by his sudden turn of events. When Lord Indra learned of Urvashi's curse and Arjun's rejection, he embraced his son, offering solace. "Your patience and self-control have even surpassed that of the sages," he praised. "Don't be troubled by Urvashi's curse. It will serve you well in your final year of exile when you must live incognito. During that time, you will endure the effects of her curse. But once that year is over, your manhood will be restored." Indra's comforting words eased Arjun's heart, yet he could not help but feel the weight of Urvashi's anger and the implications of her curse as he continued his journey, now marked by both honor and hardship. Chapter 35 Hanuman. The Pandava brothers and Draupadi felt a profound sense of loss in Arjun's absence. They had not heard from him in years and worried for his safety. Yudhishthir, burdened by guilt for the circumstances that had led to this point, often reflected on his decisions with a heavy heart. One fateful day, their home received an unexpected visitor, Sage Narad. Renowned for his mystical insight, Narad brought uplifting news of Arjun's success in acquiring divine weapons. Overjoyed by this revelation, the family felt a renewed sense of hope. Sensing the urgency of time, Narad advised Yudhishthir to embark on a sacred pilgrimage to divine places of worship until Arjun returned. Heeding Narad's wisdom, Yudhishthir and his family set off on their journey, visiting various revered sites. They engaged in acts of worship, paying homage to the deities at each sacred location. One morning, while Draupadi and Bhim sat by the tranquil banks of a river, Draupadi noticed a beautiful flower drifting downstream. Inspired, she picked it up and mused, "This would make a splendid garland for Yudhishthir, but I need more. Could you fetch more of these flowers from up the mountain?" Bhim readily agreed and set off on his request to collect the flowers, while Draupadi returned to her dwelling. As Bhim ascended the mountain, he encountered an unusual obstruction. A monkey's tail stretched along his path. Hesitating to leap over it, as he deemed it disrespectful, he instead struck the ground with his mace to awaken the slumbering monkey. The monkey stirred and inquired about Bhim's purpose. "Your tail blocks my path, dear monkey. Please remove it so I may continue my journey," Bhima requested politely. The monkey replied, "I am very tired and in need of rest. You may move my tail yourself and proceed." Annoyed but determined, Bhim bent down to lift the monkey's tail. To his astonishment, it would not budge. Despite using both hands and exerting all his immense strength, the strength granted to him by the Naga potion he had consumed in his youth, which bestowed upon him the power of 10,000 elephants, he found that the tail remained immovable. Realizing that this was no ordinary monkey, humility washed over Bhim. He folded his hands and beseeched the monkey, "Please reveal your true form." In a dazzling flash of light, the monkey transformed into Lord Hanuman. Bhim dropped to his knees, overwhelmed by the divine presence of his spiritual brother. Hanuman said, "My dear Bhim, I have longed to meet you. We are both blessings of Vayu, the wind god. Forgive my playful teasing." Excited by the revelation, Bhim engaged in a conversation with his elder brother, and they shared stories for hours. Lord Hanuman then guided Bhim, revealing two distinct paths. "This path leads to heaven, but no mortal may pass this way. This is the path you must take. It leads to the flowers you seek. But beware, for these flowers grow in the heavenly garden owned by Lord Kuber. It is guarded by celestial beings, and they will not yield them easily." With this newfound knowledge, Bhim felt a surge of determination as he prepared to navigate the challenges that lay ahead, aided by the blessings of his divine brother. Chapter 36 Arjun's Return. Guided by his brother Lord Hanuman, Bhim eventually arrived at the garden of the celestial flowers. Upon quenching his thirst, he began to gather the beautiful blooms. Suddenly, a loud voice interrupted him. "Stop! This is the garden of Lord Kuber. No outsiders are allowed here." Unfazed, Bhim responded, "I am Bhim, the son of King Pandu. These flowers are not solely in Kuber's abode. They have sprung from the breast of the mountain, and they belong to me as much as anyone else." In response to Bhim's boldness, 100 celestial guards rushed to confront him. With powerful swings of his mighty mace, Bhim smashed them away. The few guards who survived fled back to their master, Lord Kuber. Upon hearing of the incident, Kuber smiled and declared, Let the Pandava prince take as many flowers as he likes. With the bounty of flowers in his hand, Bhim returned home, where he was met with a spectacular sight. A celestial vehicle had arrived, bringing their beloved brother Arjun back to them. Arjun embraced his brothers and Draupadi, presenting her with many precious gifts. He entrusted the formidable weapons he had collected to his eldest brother Yudhishthir. That night, Arjun enthralled his brothers and Draupadi with tales of adventure in Indra's abode. He recounted the vigorous training he had undertaken and shared the story of the curse he received from Urvashi. Before departing the heavenly realms, Lord Indra had given Arjun a significant task. The inhabitants of the flying city of Nivatakavach had received a boon from Lord Brahma, rendering them unconquerable by the demigods. Over time, these beings had abused their power, causing chaos in the heavenly realms. Arjun, who was charged with the mission of conquering the city, proving his mettle as a warrior. As Arjun approached Nivatakavach, the inhabitants flew out to confront him en masse, attacking with ferocious determination. They unleashed numerous demonical illusions and wielded fierce weapons, but Arjun stood firm. With Indra's thunderbolt weapon and the various divine arms at his disposal, he defeated them all. In a display of valor, Arjun brought down the entire city using a mantra-charged astra. In accomplishing this feat, he succeeded where even Lord Indra had faltered. His brothers listened in awe as Arjun recounted his victory, eagerly requesting to see the weapons in action. Arjun happily obliged. He took out his magnificent Gandiva bow and began to demonstrate the celestial weapons one by one. As he prepared to unleash the divine astras, the earth trembled beneath him, and the sun concealed itself behind the dark clouds. At that moment, sage Narad appeared, cautioning, "O Arjun, these weapons should never be discharged without a valid target. They should only be released if you are sorely pressed by your opponent. To discharge weapons without occasion is unwise. These weapons, when properly kept, will increase your strength and happiness. However, if they are misused, they can lead to destruction of the three worlds. Your brothers will witness these weapons in action soon enough, when you will use them to vanquish your enemies in battle." With the sage's wise words echoing in their heart, the brothers felt a renewed sense of purpose as they prepared for the challenges that lay ahead. Chapter 37. The Humiliation of Duryodhan. News of the austere life led by the Pandavas reached King Dhritarashtra, filling him with sorrow for the hardships endured by his nephews and their wife. Although his heart was heavy, his determination to see his own son Duryodhan ascend the throne remained resolute. The Pandavas were still family, being the sons of his brother Pandu, which complicated his feelings. In stark contrast, Shakuni reacted differently upon hearing of the Pandavas' plight. He cunningly manipulated Duryodhan into embarking on a sporting expedition into the forest, intending to camp near the Pandavas and flaunt their extravagant wealth and luxuries. Shakuni's aim was to further break the spirit of the Pandavas, and Duryodhan eagerly embraced this idea, excited by the prospect of showing off his status. Thus, accompanied by his dear friend Karna, his uncle Shakuni, numerous wives, his brothers, and a royal guards of hundreds of fierce soldiers, Duryodhan set off into the forest. When King Dhritarashtra learned of this trip, he mistakenly believed that his son might be attempting to assist his distressed cousins, and in his misguided generosity gave his blessings for the journey. As they journeyed, Duryodhan and his entourage stumbled upon a beautiful lake where he wished to swim with his wives and friends. However, they discovered that the area was already occupied by soldiers from another kingdom. Duryodhan commanded his royal guard to clear the area so he could enjoy the lake in solitude. To their surprise, the soldiers stationed there were formidable adversaries, and when provoked, they retaliated fiercely. A fierce clash ensued, and Duryodhan's royal guard was soundly defeated. Even the valiant Karna was forced to retreat in the face of overwhelming opposition. In the chaos, Duryodhan and many of his entourage were captured, with only a few of his wives managing to escape and seek refuge in the Pandava camp. Upon arriving at Pandava camp, Duryodhan's wives implored Yudhishthir for help in rescuing their husband. Bhim scoffed at the notion, exclaiming, "Why should we help our enemy?" Yet Yudhishthir, always rational and stoic, recognized the importance of family ties. Duryodhan is our cousin and part of Kuru dynasty. We cannot allow a family member to fall into enemies' hands. Yudhishthir's decision surprised his brothers, but Draupadi, moved by the distraught women's pleas, insisted that they come to Duryodhan's aid. The Pandavas promptly gathered their weapons and set out on a mission to rescue their cousin. With the assistance of Duryodhan's wives, they located the enemy camp and executed a surprise attack. The Pandavas quickly overpowered the enemy warriors, showcasing their prowess and strength in battle. As the leader of the enemy army revealed himself, Arjun gasped in astonishment, recognizing the formidable opponent before him. The tension of the moment hung thick in the air, signaling the culmination of a confrontation that would resonate through the annals of their shared history. Chapter 38 – Abduction of Draupadi. In stark contrast to Duryodhan's ill-fated royal guards, the Pandava brothers demonstrated their vast superiority in strength and skill. They swiftly overwhelmed the enemy warriors, showcasing their prowess on the battlefield. To Arjun's surprise, he recognized the leader of the enemy army as Chitrasen, the Gandharva who had once served as his music and dance teacher in the heavenly realms of Lord Indra. Chitrasen praised, "Young prince, you have once again displayed valor and skill. My army ranks amongst the very best in the realms, yet you and your 4 brothers have defeated us in the open combat. What is it that you desire?" Arjun replied earnestly, "The prince you have captured is our cousin, Duryodhan, a member of the Kuru clan. As such, we are duty-bound to protect all our citizens. Release him and his companions immediately, and you may go your way." "As you wish, dear prince," Chitrasen replied, freeing Duryodhan and his companions. Though Duryodhan felt a relief at being rescued, the humiliation of being saved by the Pandavas only fueled his anger, planting the seeds of resentments deeper in his heart. Meanwhile, in the Pandava camp, Draupadi encountered an unexpected visitor. Jayadratha, the husband of Duryodhan's sister Dushala, was journeying towards the forest and stopped by their dwelling, requesting refreshments. When he laid eyes on Draupadi, he was struck by her beauty. Recognizing Jayadratha as Dushala's husband, Draupadi graciously offered him refreshments. However, Jayadratha, consumed by lust, began to speak seductively. "Why such a beautiful woman living in such squalor? Your husbands are mere beggars. Come back with me to my place, and I will treat you as a queen you should be." An angry Draupadi retaliated, her voice filled with indignation. "Scoundrel, how dare you speak to me in such a manner? You are married to Dushala, who is like a sister to me. My husbands will be back soon, and they will make you pay for your insolence." Despite her warnings, Jayadratha's lust had overwhelmed his judgment, and he was determined to claim Draupadi for himself, even if it meant using force. In a brazen act, he seized her arm and began dragging her towards his chariot. Draupadi's screams for help pierced the air, attracting the attention of a nearby Brahmin, who rushed to intervene. Just then, the Pandava brothers returned and heard Draupadi's desperate cries for help. In a fervent chase, the Pandavas pursued Jayadratha, whose chariot was swift but unfamiliar with the forest terrain. They intercepted him further along the path, where Nakul swiftly rescued Draupadi from his grasp. Meanwhile, Arjun unleashed his mighty arrow, destroying Jayadratha's chariot, and Bhim, with great force, pulled Jayadratha from the wreckage. Surrounded by the 5 powerful warriors and 1 furious queen, Jayadratha cowered in terror. The air crackled with tension as the Pandavas stood resolute, ready to avenge the insult to their beloved wife and uphold their honor against the transgressor. Chapter 39 – The Final Years of Exile. Jayadratha, thoroughly humbled, begged for mercy from the Pandavas and Draupadi. Yudhishthir, embodying the qualities of a benevolent king, interceded on his behalf with Bhim and Draupadi, advocating for leniency towards Dushala's husband. While Jayadratha's life was spared, his humiliation was not forgotten. Arjun handed Bhim a blade from his quiver, and with it, Bhim shaved off Jayadratha's hair, leaving 5 distinct tufts as a mark of disgrace. With a heart full of shame and smouldering resentment, Jayadratha departed. Seeking solace, he retreated to the banks of river Ganga, where he began a journey of rigorous penance, hoping for redemption from Lord Shiva. After an exceptional period of deep meditation, Lord Shiva was moved by Jayadratha's devotion and appeared before him. "What boon do you seek from me, Jayadratha?" "I desire the power to defeat the Pandavas in battle," Jayadratha replied earnestly. Lord Shiva pondered on the request before responding. "That is an impossible feat, for even celestial beings have failed to conquer Arjun in combat. However, in recognition of your dedicated penance, I grant you the ability to halt the advance of the other 4 Pandavas for a single day." With this blessing, Lord Shiva disappeared, leaving Jayadratha to return to his kingdom, his mind swirling with thoughts of vengeance. Back in Hastinapur, Duryodhan continued to wrestle with humiliation of having been rescued by the Pandavas. His loyal friend Karna offered consolation, vowing to personally kill Arjun in a battle. As part of his solemn oath, Karna pledged never to refuse a request from a Brahmin, a commitment that would weigh heavily on him in the days to come. During the final years of the Pandava exile, Duryodhan devised further schemes to undermine their spirits. He enlisted the help of a powerful sage and his entourage of more than 30 Brahmins, directing them to Pandava's dwelling with a cunning plan. Duryodhan's intent was for the sages to request food for himself and his followers. If the Pandavas were unable to provide sustenance, the sage would curse them, further weakening their morale. Unbeknownst to Duryodhan, the Pandavas possessed a divine pot that provided them with endless supply of food, a gift from Lord Surya. However, on the very day the sage and his party arrived at the Pandava camp, Draupadi had already completed her meal. According to Lord Surya's condition, the pot would only supply an abundance of food for the day until Draupadi had eaten her fill, after which it would remain empty until the following day. Panicked, Draupadi rushed inside and fervently prayed to Lord Krishna for guidance. He appeared before her and requested the pot. Upon inspecting its contents, he discovered a single grain of rice, which he consumed with a satisfied smile. Outside the dwelling, the sage and his troop suddenly experienced an unexpected sensation. Their stomachs became impossibly full. Embarrassed by their inability to partake of any food Draupadi would offer, they hastily departed, thwarting Duryodhan's plan yet again. The Pandavas, aided by divine grace, continued to endure the trials of their exile, standing strong against the plans of their adversaries. Chapter 40 Yudhishthir's Test. In the final year of their exile, just before they would enter a year of hiding, the Pandavas encountered a distressed Brahmin. A deer had become ensnared in the Brahmin's prayer tools and had fled deep into the forest, leaving the Brahmin desperate for assistance. Moved by compassion, Yudhishthir, along with his brothers Bhim, Arjun, Nakul and Sahadev, set out to help retrieve the lost implements. As they ventured into the dense woods, thirst soon gripped them. While searching for the deer, Sahadev, who had climbed a tree for a better view, spotted a distant lake. Nakul was tasked with fetching water, while the others continued their search for the deer. However, as time passed and Nakul did not return, Sahadev decided to seek him out. One by one, each of the brothers followed, but none returned until only Yudhishthir remained. Upon reaching the lakeside, Yudhishthir was met with a heart-wrenching sight. His 4 brothers lay lifeless at the water's edge, their bodies seemingly untouched by any physical harm, suggesting a mystical force had claimed them. Overwhelmed by sorrow and parched from thirst, Yudhishthir knelt by the lake, ready to drink. Suddenly, a mysterious voice interrupted him, saying, "Stop! This lake is mine. If you wish to drink its water, you must first answer my questions." Emerging from the water was a Yaksha, a supernatural being. Yudhishthir, undeterred, replied, "I understand. Please cast your questions, and I will do my best to answer them." The Yaksha began, "Who or what is a man's greatest ally?" "Patience," answered Yudhishthir. "What is more fickle than the wind?" "The mind," said Yudhishthir. "What is a man's greatest enemy?" "Anger," Yudhishthir replied. "Losing what makes one rich?" "Greed," said Yudhishthir. "What is the greatest wonder of the living?" The living frequently witnesses the death of others, yet refuses to accept their own mortality. Impressed by Yudhishthir's insightful response, the Yaksha said, "As a reward, I will revive one of your brothers. Tell me, which one should I bring back to life?" Yudhishthir reflected on his choices. "We 5 brothers are the sons of Kunti and Madri. Of Kunti's 3 sons, I remain alive. However, Mother Madri's 2 sons, Nakul and Sahadev, lie dead. I request you to revive one of them, so that each of my mothers have a son remaining." The Yaksha praised Yudhishthir for his selflessness, saying, "You are indeed a virtuous king. You could have chosen the mighty Bhim, who vowed to crush Duryodhan, or Arjun, the greatest warrior among the celestial beings. Yet, you chose in accordance with Dharma." In response to Yudhishthir's noble choice, the Yaksh restored all his brothers to life. As the Yaksha's form dissolved, he revealed himself to be Lord Yama, the god of justice. With a warm smile, Lord Yama declared, "You are my spiritual son, Yudhishthir. I bestow upon your family the gift of remaining concealed during the final year of exile, when you must live incognito within a city." Thus, the Pandavas, guided by righteousness and virtue, were blessed with the means to endure their trials ahead. Chapter 41. The Year in Hiding. Under the guidance of Yudhishthir's spiritual father, Lord Dharma, the Pandavas were instructed to spend their final year of exile in the city of Viratnagar. Before departing from their forest home, Lord Dharma returned the priest's implements, which he had taken in the guise of a deer as a part of his test for Yudhishthir. Grateful for the divine assistance, the Pandavas returned to their forest dwelling and discussed the upcoming year of challenges with Draupadi. They were nearing the end of their 12 years of exile, with the 13th year requiring them to live incognito within a city. Realizing the severity of their situation, the Pandavas knew that discovery by Duryodhan or his spies during this year would result in another 12 years of exile. Thus, they meticulously planned their disguises for the final year. Yudhishthir would take on the role of an advisor to King Virat, teaching him the intricate strategies of the game of dice. Bhim would serve as a royal cook, ensuring he had access to all the food and drink he desired, while also entertaining the king as a wrestler, showcasing his formidable strength. Arjun, who was to bear the curse of Urvashi during this final year, would disguise himself as Brihannala, a music and dance teacher tasked with training the king's daughter, Uttara. His previous training under Chitrasen in the heavenly realms of Lord Indra would serve him well in this endeavor. Nakul would assume the position of a stableman, responsible for the king's horses, while Sahadev would manage the king's cattle. Finally, Draupadi would disguise herself as a handmaiden to Queen Sudeshana, integrating seamlessly into the royal household. With their roles firmly established, the Pandavas set off for the kingdom of Viratnagar, concealing their weapons high in the branches of a tree on the outskirts of the city. Once they arrived, they successfully secured their positions and spent the first few months of their final year in relative tranquility, maintaining a low profile amidst the bustling court. However, their peace was soon disrupted. One day, while serving Queen Sudeshana, Draupadi, in her disguise as Sairandri, became the unwelcome target of the queen's brother Kichak. While visiting his sister, Kichak's eyes fell upon Draupadi, and he was immediately overcome with desire. Attempting to approach her, he made advances, but Draupadi firmly rebuffed him. "I am a married woman. I am of the Gandharva tribe, and my Gandharva men are everywhere watching over and protecting me. It would be best to forget me, dear Kichak," she said. Despite her rejection, Kichak was not a man easily deterred. As a powerful and ambitious figure within Virat's kingdom, he was determined to pursue Draupadi, unwilling to give up on his desires. His relentless pursuit would soon set the stage for a confrontation that could threaten the delicate balance the Pandavas had maintained during their year of hiding. Chapter 42. Kichak. King Virat, an elderly and feeble ruler, had delegated much of the kingdom's defense and administration to his sister's brother Kichak. As a result, Kichak wielded considerable power within the kingdom of Viratnagar. His infatuation with Draupadi, who was disguised as Sarandri, grew increasingly intense. Unable to contain his feelings, Kichak confided in the queen about his desires. The queen said, "I cannot force Sarandri to act against her will. However, I will send her to fetch some wine from your palace chambers. In private setting, you may find her more receptive to your advances." Reluctantly and filled with trepidation, Draupadi set off towards Kichak's chambers, following the queen's instructions. Upon her arrival, Kichak welcomed her with a predatory charm, beginning his attempt at seduction by promising her the esteemed position of his head wife among his other wives. Yet again, Draupadi rebuffed his advances, resolute in her refusal. Undeterred, Kichak became increasingly forceful in his pursuit, disregarding her wishes entirely. In a moment of desperation, Draupadi shoved Kichak away from her, causing him to lose his balance and fall. Seizing the opportunity, she bolted towards the court in search for protection. However, chaos ensued as Kichak regained his composure and pursued her into the court, where the king Virat was engaged in discussions with his ministers and courtiers. In a shocking display, Kichak seized Draupadi by her hair, slamming her to the ground and assaulting her. King Virat, overwhelmed by his dependence on Kichak for the kingdom's security, remained silent, leaving Draupadi feeling humiliated and utterly defenseless once more. That night, distraught and angered, Draupadi sought refuge in Bhim's quarters. She recounted the horrific events involving Kichak, her voice tinged with fury and despair. Bhim's rage flared at the thought of Draupadi's suffering, and he immediately wanted to confront Kichak, vowing to kill him for his heinous acts. However, Draupadi, having learned the importance of caution during their time of hiding, advised him against it. With the end of their year in hiding approaching, she was reluctant to jeopardize their safety with rash actions, even in the face of Kichak's transgressions. Understanding the urgency of the situation, Draupadi and Bhim devised a plan for revenge. They knew that Kichak would not relent in his pursuit of her, and they were determined to confront the challenge strategically rather than recklessly, ensuring they could maintain their cover while delivering justice for Draupadi's humiliation. Chapter 43. Draupadi's Vengeance. Kichak, the queen's brother and the formidable defender of Viratnagar, was a man accustomed to having his desires met. After Draupadi's rejection, he resorted to assaulting her, subjecting her to humiliation in the royal court while she was disguised as Sarandri, the handmaiden. In a display of cowardice, King Virat and his advisors remained silent, reluctant to offend the kingdom's powerful general. Draupadi, however, was not one to suffer in silence. With Bhim by her side, they devised a plan for revenge against Kichak. Anticipating Kichak's relentless pursuit, Draupadi pretended to relent to his lustful suggestions. "Meet me in the dance hall at midnight, mighty general, and you may have your way with me," she said. "I dare not come to your quarters, nor will you come to mine. There are watchful eyes everywhere, and I will not have negativity cast on my character." Kichak, easily lured by the prospect, gleefully agreed to the arrangement. That evening, after indulging in drinks with his friends, he made his way to the dance hall, his excitement palpable. However, as he entered the dimly lit hall, he was met not by the beautiful figure he expected, but by a powerful silhouette that caused his heart to race for an entirely different reason. Bhim, in his role as the royal cook, stepped out from the shadows, and Kichak's blood ran cold. Caught off guard, Kichak quickly steeled himself for a confrontation as Bhim lunged forward to attack. Despite his drunken state, Kichak was a skilled fighter and fought valiantly, struggling against Bhim's overwhelming strength. But few warriors could match Bhim's ferocity, and after a fierce struggle, Kichak fell to the ground, his life extinguished at the hands of Draupadi's devoted protector. The next morning, when servants discovered Kichak's lifeless body, panic engulfed the palace. The king and his advisors were bewildered, questioning who could have possibly slain their mighty general. The queen, stricken with grief, suspected that her handmaiden Sarandri might have played a role in her brother's demise. Aware of Kichak's relentless pursuit and Draupadi's subsequent humiliation, the queen confronted her. "Was this the work of your Gandharva men, seeking revenge for my brother's assault?" the queen inquired, suspicion heavy in her voice. Draupadi replied calmly, "Perhaps it was, dear queen. I warned your brother many times to leave me be for his own safety, but he paid no heed." "You should leave my service," the queen declared, her tone laced with authority. "As you wish, your majesty, but I respectfully ask for 13 days to find other employment," Draupadi requested. Fearing for her own life if she offended the handmaiden, the queen reluctantly agreed to Draupadi's request. Meanwhile, news of Kichak's death spread throughout the kingdoms. With the demise of their mighty defender, enemies of Viratnagar began plotting ambitious schemes, sensing an opportunity in the kingdom's newfound vulnerability. Chapter 44 Assault on Viratnagar. During their final year of exile, known as the Year of Hiding, the Pandavas made Viratnagar their refuge. However, following the death of Kichak, the general of the kingdom, neighboring territory sensed a golden opportunity to strike. King Susharma of the Trigarta kingdom journeyed to Hastinapur to meet with Duryodhan, proposing a collaborative attack on Viratnagar and a division of the spoils. Kichak had previously vanquished Susharma in battle, seizing a considerable portion of his land, and now Susharma sought retribution. Duryodhan eagerly accepted the alliance. With the combined forces of Hastinapur and Trigarta poised to assault Viratnagar from north and south, they believed victory would be easily achieved. The two kings devised their battle plans and positioned their armies strategically, preparing for the imminent invasion. News of this impending doom shook King Virat to his core. In the midst of this turmoil, Yudhishthir, disguised as the court advisor Kanka, stepped forward to steady the king. Well versed in the art of war, having been trained since childhood by the esteemed weapons master Drona and the strategic genius Bhishma, Yudhishthir took charge. He guided King Virat in preparing the army and formulating a defense strategy for the kingdom. Enlisting the help of his brothers Bhim, Sahadev, and Nakul, each in their respective disguises, Yudhishthir bolstered the defense of Viratnagar. As Duryodhan and Susharma commenced their assault, they were taken aback by the fierce resistance they encountered. Meanwhile, the citizens of Viratnagar flocked to the palace, seeking refuge from the invading forces. One of the attackers, led by Karna, had ravaged their lands and seized their livestock, leaving the farmers desperate for assistance. Unfortunately, the only available aid came from the young and inexperienced Prince Uttar. Nervous and untested in battle, Uttar felt overwhelmed by the gravity of the situation. Sensing the prince's trepidation, Arjun, disguised as the eunuch Brihanala, offered his support. "Prince Uttar, I once served as the charioteer of the mighty Arjun. I will help you drive off the invading army." Comforted by the presence of one who had once been associated with such a great legendary warrior, Uttar gathered his courage. Equipped for battle and with Brihannala at his side as his charioteer, the prince prepared to confront the enemy. However, Brihannala suggested a crucial detour to retrieve the celestial weapons hidden in the trees where the Pandavas had concealed them. As the army of Viratnagar faced increasing resistance, the Pandava brothers fortified the defences of their adopted home, readying themselves for the impending confrontation. Chapter 45. The Pandavas revealed. The siege of Viratnagar extended over several days, and the armies of Hastinapur and Trigarta found themselves baffled by the unexpected resilience of the defenders. Having recently slain General Kichak, they had anticipated an easy victory. However, the reality was starkly different as they approached the brink of retreat. The primary assaults came from the north and south, but Karna seized the opportunity to advance his forces from the east to claim land and cattle. Yet, as he moved forward, he encountered an unexpected obstacle: a lone war chariot manned by a young prince armed with a bow and arrow, with a female charioteer at the reins. The young prince, feeling apprehensive, loosed an arrow, but it fell woefully short of its target. This ineptitude sparked laughter amongst Karna and his troops, who were convinced that if this was all that Virat's army could muster, their path to victory was assured. But then the female charioteer drew her own bow and launched a volley of arrows, swiftly decimating Karna's forces. He was forced to defend himself against the onslaught. Simultaneously, Duryodhan, commanding his troops from the north, faced his own calamity. A colossal warrior wielding a gigantic mace smashed through his ranks, sending soldiers flying. Recognition flickered across Duryodhan's face as he exclaimed, "It is Bhim! We have discovered the Pandavas. They will surely face another 12 years of exile." However, his triumphant mood was quickly dampened by a voice of reason. The esteemed weapons master Drona interjected, "That is not the case, my prince. With the dawn of a new day, the Pandavas' final year of exile has come to an end." Duryodhan's spies had failed to locate the Pandavas during their year of hiding, and he had lost track of the remaining days while engrossed in the assault on Viratnagar. Meanwhile, during the battle, Karna recognized Arjun's distinctively fighting style. With the curse of Urvashi now lifted, Arjun had regained his true identity and no longer needed to disguise himself as Brihannala. He unleashed a devastating attack on Karna and his forces, compelling the armies of Hastinapur and Trigarta to retreat in disarray. King Virat rejoiced upon learning that the mighty Pandavas were his benefactors. Eager to form an alliance, he offered his daughter's hand in marriage to Arjun. However, Arjun respectfully declined, stating, "Princess Uttara was my dance student, and she is like a daughter to me. I propose her marriage to my son Abhimanyu instead." King Virat agreed to this arrangement, and preparations for the wedding and subsequent celebrations began in earnest. Yet, back in Hastinapur, a dark cloud loomed as Duryodhan plotted his next move, determined to reclaim his lost power and settle the score with the Pandavas. Chapter 46. Prelude to War Part 1. The Pandavas had successfully completed the terms of their 13-year exile, and by all rights, their kingdoms should have been restored to them. However, Duryodhan, consumed by anger, jealousy, and an insatiable lust for power, was unwilling to engage in any form of negotiation. In the kingdom of Virat, Lord Krishna convened with several senior kings and advisors, including King Drupad, the father of Draupadi. They deliberated over the best course of action for the Pandavas. While a peaceful resolution was favoured, they also prepared for the possibility of war. An emissary was dispatched to Hastinapur to convey the requests of Pandava brothers. Although Indraprasth rightfully belonged to them, Yudhishthir was willing to settle for far more less and modest arrangement of 5 villages, one for each of the brothers. Despite the earnest pleas from grandfather Bhishma, King Dhritarashtra, and even his mother Queen Gandhari, Duryodhan remained adamant. "I would not give them even the land that would fit on a point of a needle," he declared. In a final attempt to broker peace, Lord Krishna himself travelled to Hastinapur. However, Duryodhan's heart was hardened and he refused to heed any counsel. In his mind, he was the rightful heir to the entire kingdom, believing he had been cheated out of his birthright. He was convinced that with the loyalty of Bhishma, Drona, and Karna to the throne, he could vanquish the mighty Pandavas in battle. Before departing from Hastinapur, Lord Krishna met with Mother Kunti, who had long been deprived of the sight of her beloved sons. She sent a message back to Yudhishthir through Krishna, urging him to fight for what was rightfully theirs and to seek retribution for the humiliation Draupadi had endured at the hands of the Kauravas. Yet, amid her resolve, there was one warrior among the Kauravas who stirred concern in Mother Kunti's heart, Karna. Determined to speak to him directly, she sought him out. When Karna concluded his morning prayers by the river bank, he was taken aback to find Kunti, the mother of the Pandavas, waiting for him. In that moment, she revealed the truth of his origins, a secret she had guarded since her youth. Chapter 47, Prelude to War Part 2. In her youth, Kunti had been gifted a divine mantra that allowed her to invoke any deity and be blessed with a child. In a moment of youthful impulsiveness, she called upon the sun god Surya, resulting in the birth of a son. Overwhelmed with fear and unprepared for motherhood, Kunti placed the infant in a basket and sent him adrift down the river, where he was found and adopted by a charioteer. Kunti had recognized Karna when he boldly challenged Arjun during the great games, and now, to avert the potential loss of her 5 sons in the impending war, she revealed herself as his biological mother. She said, "You are my eldest child. Join your brothers and negotiate peace with Duryodhan." Karna, calm and resolute, responded, "Mother Kunti, I cannot go against Duryodhan. He has shown me kindness and generosity when no one else would. However, I promise you this. I will not kill your sons, Yudhishthir, Bhim, Sahadev or Nakul. But I have sworn to kill Arjun in a battle. Thus, at the end of the war, you will still have 5 sons remaining." Meanwhile, both the Kauravas and Pandavas were actively seeking alliances in preparation for the inevitable conflict. Duryodhan set out for Dwarka, hoping to gain the support of Lord Krishna. Upon hearing of Duryodhan's intentions, Arjun also hurriedly made his way to Dwarka. Duryodhan arrived first and entered Krishna's chambers while he was in deep slumber. He positioned himself at Krishna's head, taking a seat of honor. Soon after, Arjun arrived and chose to sit at Krishna's feet, a position of humility. When Krishna awoke, he first noticed Arjun, and as he sat up, he saw Duryodhan seated at his head. "How may I assist you, my princess?" Krishna inquired. Duryodhan wasted no time, stating, "I seek your alliance for the war ahead. I know you hold affection for both Arjun and me. However, since I arrived first, my request should take precedence." Krishna said, "That may be so, Prince Duryodhan, but I saw Arjun first, and according to scriptures, it is customary to assist the youngest first. I am indeed partial to both of you, so I will present you with a choice. Prince Arjun, my Narayan army is the largest and the most powerful in the world. You may choose my army for yourself, or you may choose me alone. But be warned, if you select me, I will not engage in combat or raise any weapons during the battle. I will serve you only as your friend and guide." Without any hesitation, Arjun chose Lord Krishna as his ally, a decision that left Duryodhan scarcely able to suppress his delight as he now added Krishna's formidable army to his own forces. Chapter 48, Prelude to War Part 3. Lord Indra, the celestial deity, was the spiritual father of Arjun, and he sought to aid his son as much as possible in the forthcoming conflict. Among the many threats Arjun faced, Karna stood out as the most formidable adversary, boasting archery skills that potentially surpassed those of Arjun. However, it was Karna's impenetrable armor gifted to him at birth that provided him with an even greater advantage. Bound by a vow to slay Arjun, Karna had pledged to give anything he possessed to any Brahmin who asked. One morning, Lord Indra, taking on the guise of a Brahmin, approached Karna and requested the golden armor that protected his chest. The night before, Karna had a dream about the visit of Lord Surya, the sun god, and his spiritual father, who warned him of Indra's intentions. Despite this, recognizing Indra's identity, Karna agreed to surrender the armor, but asked in return for the Vasavi Shakti, a celestial missile capable of slaying any mortal or immortal being, but usable only once. Indra consented to this request, and after Karna had removed the armor, he healed the wounds that Karna had inflicted upon himself. Meanwhile, the Kauravas were finalizing their preparations for war. Grandfather Bhishma was appointed as the supreme commander of their forces, but he stipulated that he would not kill any of the Pandava brothers, nor would Karna be allowed to engage in the battle as long as Bhishma held command. The relationship between Bhishma and Karna was fraught with a long history of animosity. Thus, Karna took on the role of Duryodhan's bodyguard. The Kaurava army was organized into battalions, each commanded by various leaders. Among the Pandavas, Drishtadyumna was named the supreme commander. Born as a divine king to King Drupad, he was destined to avenge his father's nemesis, the revered arms master Drona, who had once humiliated Drupad. The rules of engagement for the battle were established and included several significant guidelines. Combat was to commence no earlier than sunrise and conclude by sunset. Multiple warriors were prohibited from attacking a single opponent. No warrior could harm or kill one who had surrendered. Attacking an unarmed warrior was strictly forbidden. Warriors were not to strike those who were unconscious. It was also impermissible to attack a foe whose back was turned. The chosen battlefield for this monumental clash was Kurukshetra. As the armies marched towards the designated site and took their positions, an unexpected tension arose. As the war was on the brink of commencing, Arjun found himself engulfed in despair, grappling with the enormity of the conflict ahead. In response to this distress, Yudhishthir made a most unusual decision, one that would alter the course of events as battle was set to unfold. Chapter 49, Day 1 of the 18-Day War. As the moment of battle approached, the two armies stood assembled on either side of the battlefield, a palpable tension filling the air. Arjun, feeling increasingly uneasy, requested Lord Krishna, who had graciously taken on the role of his charioteer, to position the chariot where he could gain a clearer view of both armies. As he gazed across the field, his heart sank upon spotting familiar faces amongst the rank of the enemies. Friends, family, and esteemed figures, including his beloved grandfather Bhishma and his revered teacher Drona. Overwhelmed by despair, Arjun dropped his weapons and proclaimed, "I will not fight. What value is this wretched earth if it means my hands would be stained with the blood of these valiant warriors?" Slumping back into his seat, Arjun turned to Lord Krishna, seeking guidance in this moment of crisis. Recognizing his own position as a humble student, he awaited the wisdom of his divine charioteer. At this pivotal moment, Lord Krishna revealed his true form, becoming the ultimate teacher and showing Arjun the intricate workings of the universe and the nature of human existence. Meanwhile, in Hastinapur, the blind king Dhritarashtra, anxious for the news of the war, asked his counselor Sanjay to provide updates on the proceedings. Blessed with divine sight, Sanjay was privy to the profound exchange between Lord Krishna and Arjun. he relayed wondrous sights and sounds of Sri Krishna's teachings, which would later be known as the Bhagavad Gita or the Song of God. Once Krishna completed his discourse, Arjun was revitalized, filled with certainty and purpose regarding his duty to restore justice and rectify the wrongs of the world. However, an unexpected act from his older brother Yudhishthir captured everyone's attention. Yudhishthir, instead of donning his battle armor, walked towards the Kuru army with his palms folded in respect. Arjun, puzzled, asked, "What is he doing, Krishna?" To which Lord Krishna responded with a knowing smile. The Kuru army, bewildered, parted to allow Yudhishthir to pass. Approaching grandfather Bhishma first, Yudhishthir sought his blessings. Bhishma smiled and said, "Indeed, Yudhishthir, your knowledge of the scriptures is unparalleled. Had you not sought blessings from your elders first, I would have been compelled to curse you to failure in this war." In response, he granted Yudhishthir a boon, declaring, "Know that I am nearly invincible and can only be slain at a time and place of my choosing. However, you may come to me later to gain insights on how to defeat me." Grateful, Yudhishthir then approached his teacher Drona, who advised him, "As long as you wield your weapons, you are unbeatable in battle." Yudhishthir continued to receive blessings, seeking the support of his teacher Kripa and his uncle Shalya. Before returning to his side, Yudhishthir called out, "If there are any other among the sons of Dhritarashtra who wish to switch sides, you may do so now. This way, at the end of the war, the king will have at least one son remaining who can perform his last rites." His call resonated, and one voice emerged from the Kuru ranks: Yuyutsu, the son of Dhritarashtra and the half-brother to Duryodhan. Yudhishthir embraced Yuyutsu, welcoming him to their side as the stage was set for the first day of the battle to commence. Chapter 50 War, the first 4 days. The initial day of battle proved disastrous for the Pandavas. By the afternoon, the sons of the king Virat, Uttar and Shweta had fallen, leaving Arjun deeply shaken. Despite his extraordinary skills, the Pandavas faced an overwhelming Kaurava army, led by numerous formidable warriors. Chief among them was Bhishma, their own grandfather, whose unparalleled prowess on the battlefield left a devastating mark on the Pandava forces, decimating legends with relentless ferocity. As the second day unfolded, the tide began to shift slightly in the favor of the Pandavas. Amongst their fiercest warriors was the young Abhimanyu, the valiant son of Arjun and Subhadra, Lord Krishna's younger sister. Abhimanyu often engaged in fierce combat with grandfather Bhishma himself, proving himself to be a worthy adversary. Meanwhile, Bhim wreaked havoc upon the Kaurava army, smashing through thousands of enemies with his mighty mace, showcasing his immense strength. Drishtadyumna, the commander of the Pandava forces, faced off against Drona multiple times, with neither side gaining a definitive advantage. Arjun, during certain moments, displayed such magnificence in battle that warriors on both sides paused to witness the spectacle. To compound the challenges faced by the Kauravas, Bhim summoned his son Ghatotkach, a hybrid of human and demon. With his shape-shifting abilities, Ghatotkach unleashed chaos within Duryodhan's ranks. While Duryodhan had initially been pleased with the outcomes of the first day, by the end of the third day, his mood shifted to one of frustration and despair. Bhim's relentless assaults forced him to retreat on numerous occasions, leading Duryodhan to express his anger at grandfather Bhishma. He screamed, "You have shown too much leniency towards the Pandavas. Your affection for Arjun has allowed him to wreak havoc on our battalions without resistance. I would have preferred Karna as the supreme commander." Bhishma, deeply insulted, declared with determination, "Tomorrow I swear to kill Arjun in battle or compel Lord Krishna to break his vow and take up arms." The next day, Bhishma unleashed his full wrath upon the battlefield, raining death upon thousands of Pandava soldiers. Arrows flew like torrents, targeting both Arjun and Lord Krishna. Caught in the turmoil, Arjun found himself paralyzed by the thought of fighting against Bhishma, the very man he revered as a father figure. Recognizing that Arjun's life was at stake, Lord Krishna dismounted the chariot and seized a discarded chariot wheel. Raising it high, he charged towards Bhishma, his actions fulfilling the promise of forcing Lord Krishna into battle. Realizing that a death at the hands of Lord Krishna would grant him instant entry into the heavens, Bhishma laid down his weapons. Meanwhile, Arjun, filled with shame that his inability to engage with Bhishma had compelled Krishna to break his vow, clutched Krishna's leg, pleading for him to put down the wheel. In response to Arjun's earnestness, Lord Krishna relented, allowing Arjun to recommit himself to the fight with renewed determination, ready to engage without restraint in the battle ahead. Chapter 51 War, Day 5 to 10 The Fall of Bhishma. During the first 8 days of the war, the pendulum of victory swung unpredictably between the two sides. Bhim, with his unmatched strength, claimed the lives of many of Duryodhana's brothers, and often came perilously close to ending Duryodhana's life as well. The armies employed various battle formations, each striving to outmaneuver the other, resulting in devastating losses on both sides. Despite the intensity of the conflict, the rules of war established at the outset were still observed, although with great difficulty. Throughout this turmoil, the most formidable force in the Kaurava army remained Grandfather Bhishma. As the 9th day dawned, the Pandavas found themselves on the brink of retreat when the sun set, signaling the end of hostilities for the day. That night, Yudhishthir, after conferring with Lord Krishna, made the crucial decision to approach Grandfather Bhishma for guidance. Bhishma received the Pandavas and Krishna warmly. "How may I assist you, my dear children?" he inquired. Yudhishthir responded earnestly, "Grandfather, at the outset of the war, you mentioned that we could seek your counsel on how to defeat you. If this continues, we will soon have no army left to fight. We must know your secret now." Bhishma nodded thoughtfully, acknowledging the gravity of the situation. "There is indeed one way you may defeat me," he revealed. "I will never attack or fight a woman, nor one who has previously been a woman. In my youth, I abducted 3 princesses to be brides for the king of Hastinapur. However, one princess was already in love with another man, and upon being rejected by both her beloved and her family, she returned to Hastinapur, demanding that I marry her instead. Bound by my oath, I could not comply, and she tragically took her own life after vowing to return in a subsequent life to seek my downfall. Now, you fight alongside the son of King Drupad, Shikhandi, who has proven himself valiant and has slain many Kuru warriors. You should know that Prince Shikhandi was Princess Amba in her previous life." With this vital information, the Pandavas returned to their camp, strategizing their next move. The following day, Arjun rode into the battle with Shikhandi positioned in his chariot. Knowing that Bhishma would not attack him while Shikhandi was present, Arjun unleashed his full might. A barrage of arrows pierced Bhishma's armor, and at last the mighty warrior fell, the arrows serving as a makeshift bed for him on the ground. As the battle paused, warriors from both sides took a moment to pay their respects to Bhishma. Approaching him, Arjun fulfilled Bhishma's request for a pillow befitting a warrior by shooting 3 arrows into the ground, which propped up Bhima's head. Then Arjun shot another arrow, causing a fountain of water to erupt nearby, quenching Bhishma's thirst. Throughout the night, Bhishma shared his wisdom with family members from both factions, imparting invaluable counsel. At the most auspicious moment, he chose to depart from his mortal form, marking the end of an era and the loss of a great warrior in the unfolding saga of the Mahabharata. Chapter 52 War, Day 11 to 13 The Trap. With Bhishma's fall, the mantle of Supreme Commander passed to Dronacharya, the Master of Arms and the Pandavas' former teacher. As the war progressed, Karna also entered the fray, taking command of his own battalions. The forces of the Pandavas and Kauravas were now evenly matched, with the tide of battle shifting back and forth as each side sought to gain the upper hand. In a strategic move, Duryodhan commanded Drona to capture Yudhishthir, aiming to bring the war to a swift conclusion. However, the Pandava forces effectively protected their king and launched a counter-offensive to attempt the capture of Duryodhan instead. Drona seized this opportunity and devised a cunning plan, arranging his forces into a concentric formation with Duryodhan at its center, intending to lure the Pandavas into a trap that would enable him to eliminate their most formidable warriors. Knowing that Arjun was the one and only capable of breaching this formidable arrangement, Drona lured him away to the eastern part of the battlefield earlier in the day. The only warrior left with Yudhishthir who possessed the knowledge to penetrate the formation was Abhimanyu, the teenage son of Arjun. Although he had the skill to enter the formation, Abhimanyu lacked the experience to find a way out once inside. The Pandavas quickly hatched a plan, designating Abhimanyu to lead the charge into the formation, with the rest of the battalion following closely behind. Together, they hoped to overpower Duryodhan and emerge from the trap victorious. As Abhimanyu's charioteer voiced concerns about the weight of responsibility resting on such young shoulders, Abhimanyu reassured him with confidence. "Do not fear, I am the son of Arjun, the greatest warrior who ever lived. I am the nephew of Lord Krishna. Today, the war will come to an end." With determination, Abhimanyu charged into the heart of the Kaurava formation. His uncles, Bhim, Sahadev, Nakul and Yudhishthir trailed close behind. He carved a path through the Kaurava warriors, leaving a trail of devastation and striking fear into the heart of Duryodhan himself. Among the defenders within the formation was Jayadratha, the king who had previously attempted to abduct Draupadi during the Pandavas' exile. After suffering humiliation at the hands of the Pandava brothers, he underwent rigorous penance to seek Lord Shiva's blessings for redemption. As a result of his penance, Lord Shiva granted Jayadratha a boon, allowing him to halt the advance of the Pandava forces, except for Arjun for a single day. Armed with this divine favor, Jayadratha invoked the boon, and to the astonishment of the Pandava brothers, managed to hold all of them and their allies at bay, preventing them from breaking through the battle formation. Consequently, the young Abhimanyu found himself trapped within the formation, isolated and surrounded. Chapter 53 War, Day 13 and 14 The Fall of Abhimanyu. Abhimanyu continued his relentless advance into Dronacharya's battle formation, instilling terror in the hearts of even the most seasoned warriors. His prowess in battle was unmatched, and soon Duryodhan's son Lakshman dared to confront the young prince. However, he proved to be of no match for Abhimanyu, who effortlessly felled him with a single arrow. In a fit of rage and grief over his son's defeat, Duryodhan screamed at Drona, demanding, "Kill him now by any means necessary." Until that moment, Drona had adhered to the established rules of the war, but the threat posed by the unrelenting Abhimanyu necessitated a change in tactics. He consulted with Karna, devising a plan to dismantle Abhimanyu's advantages by destroying his bow and slaying his steed and charioteer. Karna executed the orders without hesitation. With Abhimanyu left unarmed, the veteran warriors of the Kaurava army, including Drona, Karna, Kripa, Kritavarma, Shakuni, and Ashwathama, descended upon him. Despite being weaponless, Abhimanyu demonstrated remarkable resilience, seizing the wheel of his broken chariot to continue his assault against the Kaurava forces, claiming many lives in the process. Yet, as arrows rained upon him, piercing his armor, his strength began to wane. Ultimately, a crushing blow from a mace struck the back of his head, ending the young prince's life at a tender age of 16. On the 13th day of the war, the fall of Abhimanyu marked a significant blow to the principles of Dharma, leaving a profound void on the battlefield. Meanwhile, far from the fray, Princess Uttara mourned the loss of her beloved Abhimanyu, cradling her unborn child in her womb. The news of his death reached Arjun, who was initially engulfed in despair. However, that sorrow swiftly transformed into a blazing fury. Arjun blamed Jayadratha for his son's demise, as the king had successfully kept his brothers from the battle formation, leaving Abhimanyu isolated and vulnerable. With a heart full of vengeance, Arjun swore that he would either slay Jayadratha before sunset on the following day or take his own life by fire. When the news of this deadly vow reached Jayadratha, fear gripped him, and he considered fleeing the battlefield. However, Duryodhan, Drona, and Shakuni saw this as a golden opportunity to eliminate the most lethal warrior among the Pandavas. As dawn broke on the 14th day, Arjun launched a fierce assault on the Kaurava army, honing in on Jayadratha as his primary target. Drona, anticipating Arjun's wrath, arranged his forces in a manner that effectively shielded the terrified king. As the day wore on, it appeared that Arjun was no closer to fulfilling his vow. The Kaurava army's confidence grew alongside their numbers. In a pivotal moment, Lord Krishna turned his gaze to the sky, causing the moon to move into position, eclipsing the sun and casting the battlefield into darkness. Believing the sun had set and the day's battle had been concluded, Jayadratha emerged from his hiding place, eager to witness Arjun's self-immolation. Just then, the moon shifted, revealing the sun once more. Seizing the opportunity, Arjun released a swift arrow, and with it, Jayadratha, Duryodhan's brother-in-law, met his end. Chapter 54 War. The 14th night, Ghatotkach. With the treacherous slaying of Abhimanyu, the established rules of engagement that had guided the war were utterly disregarded. The battle raged on into the night, and in the darkness, Ghatotkach, the half-demon son of Bhim, emerged as a formidable force. His powers thrived in the absence of light, unleashing chaos upon the Kaurava army. Dronacharya, incensed by the loss of Jayadratha under his protection, fought against the Pandava forces with a fury that sought vengeance. Meanwhile, Arjun steeled himself to confront Karna, the rival archer who had long been a source of frustration for him. Despite Arjun's claims of superiority, Karna had proven to be a resilient adversary. Yudhishthir, their elder brother, had often admonished Arjun for his failure to defeat Karna. Now, Arjun was prepared for a final showdown. However, Lord Krishna interjected with a warning. Karna wields the Vasavi Shakti, a weapon bestowed upon him by Lord Indra. Even you would find it impossible to withstand this weapon, Arjun. Ghatotkach possesses both divine and demonic arms. Let him engage with Karna first and weaken him, Krishna advised. Though initially hesitant, Arjun conceded to Krishna's counsel. As the night deepened, Ghatotkach proved to be a tremendous challenge for the Kaurava forces. Ashwathama, Drona's son, attempted to hold him off, as did Karna, but to little effect. Ghatotkach's strength grew with shadows, and his power of illusion instilled terror within the Kaurava ranks, causing many to flee the battlefield in fear. Duryodhan, witnessing the chaos, turned to Karna in desperation, exclaiming, "My friend, we cannot endure this any longer. End the demon now, by any means necessary." Karna had reserved Lord Indra's weapon specifically for confrontation with Arjun, but the dire situation forced his hand. He withdrew the Vasavi Shakti from his quiver, recited the mantra to activate it, and launched it at Ghatotkach. In response, Ghatotkach expanded to an enormous size, leaping into the air to evade the deadly strike. However, Karna's aim was true, and the Vasavi Shakti struck down the demon. As Ghatotkach fell, his massive form took down an entire battalion of the Kaurava army, leaving devastation in his wake. Arjun, watching from a distance, was horrified by the loss of his nephew. In contrast, Lord Krishna simply smiled. Though Ghatotkach had been a valuable ally, His demonic nature had caused significant problems in the celestial realms. Had Ghatotkacha survived, Lord Krishna himself would have to intervene to end the demon's existence. Ultimately, Ghatotkacha's death served a noble purpose. He had sacrificed himself to rid the battlefield of a formidable weapon that might have been used against Arjun in the future. Chapter 55 War, Day 15 The Fall of Drona. On the 15th day of battle, Dronacharya, the supreme commander of the Kaurava forces, unleashed a relentless onslaught on the Pandava army. Fueled by the scornful taunts of Duryodhan, he set aside any semblance of honorable conduct, determined to secure victory for his king. The carnage was staggering. Countless Pandava soldiers fell to his might by the hour. Yet, despite his ferocity, Drona hesitated to unleash his full wrath against the Pandava brothers, particularly against Arjun, whom he regarded as his most cherished student. As the day wore on, Dronacharya claimed the lives of many warriors, including King Virat, Abhimanyu's father-in-law, and King Drupad, the father of Drishtadyumna and Draupadi. Drishtadyumna, who had been born solely for the purpose of avenging his father's death, found himself overcome with grief and anger, but he lacked the prowess to match the old warrior's skills. Dronacharya had once warned the Pandavas that he could not be defeated while he wielded weapons. Now, it seemed that Pandava army stood on the brink of total annihilation. Recognizing the dire situation, Lord Krishna devised a cunning plan to confront Dronacharya. He explained to the Pandava brothers, Guru Drona has only one attachment that surpasses his dedication to the battlefield, his son Ashwathama. If we can convince him that Ashwathama has fallen in the battle, he will lay down his arms and enter meditation. That will be our moment to strike and end the reign of the Kaurava commander. Though Yudhishthir and Arjun felt a deep unease about the deceit required by this plan, Bhim was quick to agree. To enact the ruse, Bhim took the life of an elephant named Ashwathama and in the heat of the battle called out, "Ashwathama is dead!" Hearing this, Dronacharya felt a wave of despair wash over him as he contemplated the loss of his beloved son. However, he initially dismissed the claim, knowing Ashwathama to be a formidable warrior not easily vanquished. Determined to seek the truth, Drona drew closer to Yudhishthir, the embodiment of righteousness and truth. He cried out, "Answer me, Yudhishthir, is Ashwathama dead?" Bound by his nature to tell no lies, Yudhishthir responded, "Yes, Ashwathama is dead," and then quietly added, "Ashwathama, the elephant that is," hoping the distraction of battle would obscure the truth of his words. However, Dronacharya only caught the first part of Yudhishthir's response. The impact was devastating. His weapons fell from his hands, and he sank to his knees, overcome by grief. In that moment of despair, he entered a profound meditation, unaware of the threat surrounding him. Seizing this pivotal opportunity, Drishtadyumna launched himself into Dronacharya's chariot. With the swift stroke of his sword, he severed the head of the venerable warrior, a scene that struck horror into the hearts of Arjun and the other soldiers present. Thus, the illustrious and revered Dronacharya met his end on the battlefield, marking a significant turning point in the Great War. Chapter 56 War, Day 16 and 17 Karna. On the 16th day of the great conflict, Karna was appointed as the supreme commander of the Kaurava forces. His life had been a tapestry woven with tragedy and an unquenchable thirst for greatness. Just before the war commenced, Kunti, the mother of Pandavas, revealed to Karna a truth that would forever alter his fate. She was his biological mother. In her desperation as a young mother with an infant, Kunti had set him adrift on the Ganga, where he was discovered and adopted by a humble charioteer and his wife. Unbeknownst to the Pandava brothers and even to his ally Duryodhan, Karna was the eldest sibling of the Pandavas. With a fierce determination, he resumed his role in the battle, having promised Kunti that he would not take the lives of her other sons, sparing all but Arjun. True to his word, Karna refrained from slaying Yudhishthir, Bhim, Sahadev, and Nakul whenever the opportunity arose. His animosity was reserved for Arjun, his lifelong rival, who was revered by many. Karna harbored deep-seated envy for the acclaim that Arjun received, believing that such admiration should rightfully belong to him. On the 16th day, Bhim finally confronted Dushasan, Duryodhan's brother. During the infamous game of dice, Yudhishthir had lost his wife Draupadi to gambling, and Dushasan had cruelly dragged her into the royal court by her hair. Bhim had vowed to avenge this humiliation by breaking Dushasan's chest and drinking his blood, using it to wash Draupadi's hair. On that day, he fulfilled his grim oath, causing horrors amongst soldiers on both sides. As the 17th day dawned, Karna felt an unsettling ease. Throughout his youth, he had been unaware of his royal lineage, yet he always sensed that he was destined for a life greater than that of a mere charioteer. He had exhibited remarkable prowess in combat and sought the tutelage of the greatest warrior of his time, the immortal Lord Parshuram, an avatar of Vishnu. However, Parshuram had vowed never to teach a Kshatriya, the warrior class. To deceive his teacher, Karna presented himself as a Brahmin, a member of the priestly class, and Parshuram accepted him as a student. Karna excelled under his guidance, absorbing knowledge with remarkable intensity. One day, as a part of customary dakshina or fee for his education, Karna offered his thigh as a resting place for Parshuram's head while the teacher slept. During this time, an insect bit into Karna's thigh, causing him excruciating pain. Yet, he remained motionless, unwilling to disturb his teacher's slumber. When Parshuram awoke and saw the blood-soaked thigh, he exclaimed, "No Brahmin could endure such pain. You have deceived me. You are a Kshatriya." In his fury, he declared, "I have imparted you all of my knowledge of warfare and archery, but this is my curse. When you are in your hour of need, you will forget everything." Now, as the final confrontation loomed between Karna and his most formidable foe Arjun, they exchanged celestial missiles in a fiery volley, neither gaining the upper hand. Unfortunately for Karna, his chariot wheel became lodged in a crevice. As he dismounted to free it, Arjun prepared to reload his Gandiv bow. At Lord Krishna's urging, Arjun loosed his arrow. In that crucial moment, the curse of Parshuram took effect. Karna, who had once possessed the skill to counter such an attack, found himself bereft of any knowledge and expertise he had worked so hard to acquire. The arrow struck true, and Karna fell, marking the end of his bitter rivalry with Arjun and the tragic revelation that he had unknowingly slain his eldest brother. Chapter 57 War, Day 18 of the 18-Day War. On the 18th day of the monumentous war, Duryodhan was engulfed by despair at the losses he had suffered, mourning the death of his brother Dushasan and his steadfast friend Karna. In an attempt to rally the remnants of the Kaurava forces, Shalya, the paternal uncle of the Pandavas, was appointed as the new supreme commander. Despite his best efforts to lead the army, Shalya was slain early in the day by Yudhishthir, further diminishing the Kauravas' hopes. With only 98 brothers remaining, Duryodhan's surviving kin launched desperate assault against Bhim, seeking vengeance for the death of Dushasan. Yet, they proved no match for Bhim, the mighty Pandava, who wielded his deadly mace with unparalleled ferocity, smashing through their ranks. Ultimately, Duryodhan was left as the last living son of Queen Gandhari. As the day wore on, Sahadev fulfilled the prophecy Bhim had uttered during the game of dice, bringing an end to the life of Duryodhan's uncle, Shakuni, the master manipulator whose scheming had instigated the war. With every shred of hope for victory disintegrating around him, Duryodhan seized his mace and fled in desperation, seeking refuge at a nearby lake. However, the relentless Pandava soldiers eventually tracked him down. Yudhishthir, accompanied by his 4 brothers and Lord Krishna, approached the lake and called out, "Reveal yourself, Duryodhan. Your army has been vanquished. Yet, I offer you one final opportunity for victory. If you can defeat any one of us in combat, you may retain your throne." Duryodhan emerged from the water, mace in hand, and selected Bhim as his opponent, his childhood rival. Although Bhim possessed greater strength, Duryodhan had trained extensively under the guidance of Drona, Bhishma, and Lord Krishna's elder brother Balram. As the duel progressed, Bhim began to tire, and in a pivotal moment, he noticed Lord Krishna gesturing by tapping his thigh. This gesture reminded Bhim of the oath he had taken when Duryodhan had lustfully tapped his thigh after winning Draupadi in the game of dice. With a newfound determination, Bhim swung his mace low, shattering Duryodhan's thigh. As Duryodhan fell, he lamented that the blow was against the rule of the mace fighting. Bhim, however, retorted with bitter anger, "Where was your adherence to rules when you tried to poison me as a child, or when you plotted to kill my mother and brothers in the house of wax? Where was your honor when you attempted to dishonor our wife in the court, or when you murdered my nephew Abhimanyu? No, Duryodhan, you have received what you deserve, a slow and lonely death." With that, the Pandavas and Lord Krishna departed, leaving the dying prince by the lake. As night cloaked the battlefield, 3 of Duryodhan's loyal allies steadily approached their fallen leader, intent on making treacherous plans in the dark of the night. Chapter 58 War, Dark Night. As darkness enveloped the battlefield, Ashwathama, the son of Drona, along with Kripacharya and Kritavarma, gathered around the wounded Duryodhan. In a hushed tone, Ashwathama whispered to the dying prince, "We have witnessed the treacherous manner in which Bhim brought you down, valiant leader. The Pandavas similarly deceived us with false rumors of my death to slay my father. I vow to avenge both your and my father's dishonor." Duryodhan managed a weak smile and commanded Kripacharya and Kritavarma to anoint Ashwathama as the final supreme commander of the Kaurava forces. Filled with newfound purpose, the trio returned to their camp, where Ashwathama pondered a strategy to overcome the Pandavas. As he gazed into the distance, he noticed an owl swooping down to prey on an unsuspecting birds nestled in their nests. Inspired by the owl's ruthless efficiency, a sinister plan began to form in Ashwathama's mind. That very night, Ashwathama and his companions steadily infiltrated the Pandava camp with the intent of slaying the brothers in their sleep. However, they were dismayed to discover that the Pandavas were absent, leaving behind only the Upapandavas, the 5 sons of Draupadi. Taking advantage of their vulnerability, Ashwathama ruthlessly killed the sleeping boys and then made his way into Drishtadyumna's quarters. There, while the warrior was in slumber, Ashwathama struck him down as well. With blood on their hands, the trio moved through the camp, mercilessly slaughtering the remaining forces of the Pandava army. In the stillness of the night, they set the camp ablaze, ensuring that no one would escape their wrath. Ashwathama then returned to the fallen Duryodhan to relay the details of their gruesome deeds. A smile of satisfaction crossed Duryodhan's face as he finally relinquished his mortal coil, content in the knowledge of his vengeance. When the news of the massacre reached the Pandava brothers, they were plunged into despair. They summoned Draupadi to deliver the heart-wrenching news, and upon hearing of the loss of her father, brother, and all her children in the conflict, she fainted, overwhelmed by grief. With the realization of Ashwathama's involvement in the slaughter, Lord Krishna cautioned Arjun about the vengeful son of Drona, warning him that Ashwathama possessed knowledge of a weapon of immense power. Determined to confront him, the brothers set out to find Ashwathama at sage Vyasa's ashram, located near the banks of Ganga. To Ashwathama's surprise, he was quickly discovered by the Pandava brothers. In a moment of desperation, he picked up a blade of grass and charged it with the divine mantra, unleashing a celestial missile known as Brahmastra. This weapon was one of the most destructive and irresistible known to the gods, and Ashwatthama prepared to wield it against his enemies. Chapter 59. The End. As the Pandava brothers beheld the Brahmastra hurtling towards them, Arjun swiftly released a counter-weapon to neutralize the impending destruction. This triggered the intervention of sage Vyas and sage Narad, who recognized that the collision of these two potent weapons should unleash 12 years of drought upon the land. In an instant, time itself seemed to pause as the sages urged both Arjun and Ashwatthama to withdraw their weapons. Arjun, possessing the knowledge to do so, successfully recalled his weapon. However, Ashwatthama lacked the skill to recall his missile. Instead, in a fit of rage and vengeance, he redirected the Brahmastra to seek out and annihilate any remaining lineage of the Pandavas. The weapon veered towards the womb of Princess Uttara, who was carrying the child of Prince Abhimanyu, the grandchild of Arjun. Sensing this dire turn of events, Lord Krishna intervened and dissolved the celestial weapon before it could cause further destruction. With his thirst for vengeance sated through the deaths of Drona and Duryodhan, Ashwatthama surrendered himself to the Pandavas. Following the guidance of sage Vyas, the brothers chose to spare his life out of respect for their childhood teacher Drona. However, Ashwatthama, marked by a gem on his forehead that had conferred immunity from hunger, thirst, fatigue, aging, disease, and even attacks from deities, was punished for his heinous acts. Lord Krishna commanded him to sever the gem from his forehead and cursed him to wander the forests alone, shunned by all until the end of the Kali Yuga. Furthermore, his wound would never heal, a constant reminder of his misdeeds. The Pandavas and Lord Krishna then returned to Hastinapur, where the people mourned deeply, grieving for the many loved ones lost in a conflict. In a moment of revelation, Mother Kunti disclosed the truth of Karna being the eldest brother of the Pandavas. The brothers, stricken with sorrow, performed the final rites for their family members and friends. Queen Gandhari, overwhelmed with grief over the loss of her 100 sons, blamed Lord Krishna for their demise. She cursed him, proclaiming that the Yadava clan would face extinction and that he would die like an ordinary mortal. Lord Krishna accepted the curse of the devoted yet sorrowful Gandhari, who had blindfolded herself since her marriage to share in the blindness of her husband. Years later, conflict erupted with the Yadava clan, leading to its tragic downfall. One fateful morning, as Lord Krishna rested in the forest, a hunter mistook him for prey and shot an arrow that pierced his ankle. Thus, fulfilling the curse of Gandhari, Lord Krishna departed from the mortal realm. Chapter 60. Closure. Yudhishthir ruled the kingdom for 36 years, during which the lands enjoyed peace and prosperity. However, upon hearing the news of Lord Krishna's passing, the Pandavas decided to leave the mortal plane. The kingship was then entrusted to Parikshit, the grandson of Arjun. The Pandavas and Draupadi set out on the foot for the pinnacle of Mount Meru, the gateway to the heavenly realms. As they commenced their journey, a stray dog followed them closely. The path to the mountain was long and arduous. Eventually, Draupadi, overcome by exhaustion, fell to her death. Bhim, who trailed behind Yudhishthir, called out in despair, "Why did she fall, Yudhishthir?" The wise Yudhishthir replied, "Draupadi loved all her husbands, but cherished Arjun the most, and thus she fell." The five brothers, alongside the stray dog, continued their ascent. Soon after, Sahadev stumbled and fell. Bhim again questioned Yudhishthir, "Why did he fall?" Yudhishthir responded, he was very proud of his wisdom and believed there was none equal to him in intellect, and so he fell. Next, Nakul fell, prompting Bhim to ask once more, "Why did he fall?" Yudhishthir explained, he was vain about his beauty, and thus he fell. Then it was Arjun's turn to fall. Bhim inquired again, "Why did he fall?" Yudhishthir replied, he was overly proud of his prowess as a warrior, believing no one could rival him, and so he fell. Lastly, Bhim fell himself, leading Yudhishthir to reflect. He was gluttonous and showed no regard for hunger of others, and therefore he fell. At last, Yudhishthir reached the summit of the mountain, accompanied only by the stray dog that had journeyed with him from the city. A celestial chariot descended from the heavens, and Lord Indra emerged. Congratulations, Yudhishthir! You are the first to have earned the honor of attaining the heavens while still in a mortal form. As Yudhishthir stepped onto the chariot, the dog followed closely behind. Stop, commanded Indra. The dog cannot enter the heavens, it must remain here. Yudhishthir, unwavering in his loyalty, stepped out of the chariot and declared, This dog has walked the same path and endured the same hardships as I have. If it is not permitted to join me, then I will remain here as well. Indra attempted to persuade Yudhishthir otherwise, but he remained resolute in his decision. Suddenly, a brilliant light enveloped the dog, and in its place stood Lord Dharmaraj, the spiritual father of Yudhishthir. Congratulations, Yudhishthir. Once again, you exemplify your perfect virtues and sense of justice. I am pleased. Yudhishthir then accompanied Lord Indra to the heavens, where he was taken aback to see Duryodhan and the other Kauravas present. He searched in vain for his brothers and Draupadi. Where are my brothers and Draupadi? He asked. Indra led Yudhishthir down a dark staircase, descending into hell. The acrid smell of brimstone and the anguished cry of tortured souls assaulted his senses. He could hear the voice of his brothers and Draupadi calling out in torment. Why are my brothers and Draupadi here, while the Kauravas dwell in heaven? Yudhishthir questioned. The Kauravas have atoned for their sins on the battlefield, replied Indra. Your brothers and Draupadi must endure the suffering for their transgressions and sins committed. Yudhishthir resolutely declared, Then I shall remain here until they have completed their penance. He settled down in the scorched earth, enveloped by the stench of decay. After what felt like an eternity, Lord Dharmaraj revealed himself once more, and the illusion of hell faded away. You have passed your final test, Yudhishthir. All kings must face the fire of hell to remain truthful. Yudhishthir was then reunited with his family in the heavens, shedding his mortal form. The tale concluded as Lord Ganesh, having used his broken tusk as a writing instrument, completed the transcription of Sage Vyasa's story. This collaboration between the divine and humanity culminated in the magnificent epic known as the Mahabharata.